Hello, and thank you for joining me here at DJ's Movie Reviews. I write short movie reviews for people with short attention spans. Please remember to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon to get notifications for whenever I release new content, and comment so we can talk about this episode or any other episode. Also feel free to suggest movies for me to watch. Today's episode is a special edition. This is the Let's Get Ready for Halloween edition. Normally, I would start out with a movie poster, let you know who the director is, and then who stars in the movie, and immediately after that, I'd give you my thoughts on the whole thing, to include the production, the costumes, etc., stuff like that. This one is going to be about the movies that pushed me into my love affair for the horror movie genre. I won't be rating any of these movies, but we will be talking about what scared me about them. So here is a top 11 of sorts of the movies that scared the hell out of me growing up, but that I appreciate more now as an adult. So in no particular order, The People Under the Stairs. Here's what's on the poster. In every neighborhood, there's one house that adults whisper about, and children cross the street to avoid. Now, Wes Craven, creator of A Nightmare on Elm Street, takes you inside The People Under the Stairs. So as I mentioned, this movie was directed by the horror movie legend himself, Wes Mother Effing Craven, who also directed classics like The Last House on the Left and The Hills Have Eyes. He scared more people over his career than he could have ever counted. Sadly, he passed away in 2015, but left behind a fantastic legacy of horror movies to keep his memory alive. Two adults and a juvenile break into the house occupied by a brother and sister and their stolen children. There, they must fight for their lives. What I think about this movie. The People Under the Stairs had a few things that bothered me and scared the hell out of me as well. Never mind the whole incestuous love affair by our villains. That is a whole other story for a whole other episode. What bothered me is that these folks had kidnapped a small army of boys and mutilated them. Then they starved them and they kept them in the basement to use just in case, one day they needed protection. Who knew? Next, they kept a little girl that they basically tortured physically and mentally for her entire life. Even as a kid, the thought that someone would treat a child like that just bothered me. And now that I'm a father, it bothers me even more. I get pissed off thinking about this movie. But I do appreciate that it was made and that it was scary enough to, kind of scar me a little bit, but point me in the direction of the movies I will later on come to enjoy. The main thing that I got from this movie is that monsters aren't real, but they exist in humanity itself. Pretty deep, right? Whew, I wrote that myself. The next movie on this list is Hellraiser. Demon to some, angels to others. He'll tear your soul apart. Hellraiser. Clive Barker wrote and directed Hellraiser, as well as Candyman and Lord of Illusion. He's also an accomplished author and occasional actor, but he's also a great artist. If you've ever seen any of his work, it's fantastic. Check it out. The plot of this movie is that an unfaithful wife encounters the zombie of her dead lover. The demonic Cenobites are pursuing him after he escapes their sadomasochistic underworld. Crazy, huh? I thought so too. What I think, Hellraiser as a whole is very disturbing. It's from the way the movie starts to the S&M gear of Pinhead. There's plenty to be fearful of. The main thing that got me is the fact that a dumbass decided to unlock a puzzle box that released not only a gory trap of death, but a demon of epic proportions. A demon that had a huge love of extreme suffering without the benefit of a safe word. Also, I was not very fond of the fact that you had a dude that was skinned alive just kind of stealing other people's skin. I mean, who does that? Obviously skinless dudes. Anyway, this movie is a little bit gross, but acts as kind of a cautionary tale that basically ends in an existence of non-stop pain and suffering. This next movie is The Exorcist. It was written by William Peter Blatty as a novel, and then later on directed by William Friedkin. On the poster we got this little line. Something almost beyond comprehension is happening to a girl on this street, in this house. And a man has been sent for as a last resort. And this man is The Exorcist. The Exorcist was directed by William Friedkin, who also directed The French Connection and Cruising. His most recent movie, in 2017, was a documentary called The Devil and Father Amorth. The plot of this movie: when a teenage girl is possessed by a mysterious entity, her mother seeks the help of two priests to save her daughter, an old one and a young one. What I think? I am a Catholic, and I do believe in the devil, as it is in the Bible. The thought that a demon could possibly enter my body and take control of my mind has always been a fear of mine. Was I being paranoid, or was I letting my religion dictate how I perceived what Captain Howdy was doing to Reagan? Who knows? All I know is that there is a point in a person's life where you have to ask yourself if you would allow anyone to tell you, "Your mom sucks dicks in hell." I would have to say that that is a Texas-sized hell no. Even with that, if you throw up on me and talk to me in tongues, there's a chance that I will get the hell out of there. This is a great movie, fantastic visual effects for the time, and again, a cautionary tale. Next movie on this list is John Carpenter's The Thing. It's the ultimate in alien terror. John Carpenter directed The Thing and insisted that his name be above the title, as he also did with his other little movie called John Carpenter's Halloween. This master of horror has been scaring us for 4+ decades, with other movies like The Prince of Darkness, In the Mouth of Madness, and The Fog, to name a few. The plot of this movie is a research team in Antarctica is hunted by a shape-shifting alien that assumes the appearance of his victims. What I think, the movie The Thing made it very hard for me to enjoy spaghetti for a while. Now, if you've seen this movie, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you were in an isolated area with 10 other people and limited communication with anyone else in the outside world, then you can probably see how, with the addition of an intruder entering the area, that can cause an unbelievable amount of paranoia. The alien that is in this movie becomes its victim to lure others unknowingly to their deaths. That in itself is terrifying. What makes everything worse is that once it is discovered, it transforms into something not of this earth that caused extreme nightmares for me in my childhood and made me very wary of people that I was unfamiliar with. It brought a whole new level to stranger danger on my doorstep. But moving on. The next movie is The Nightmare on Elm Street. If Nancy doesn't wake up screaming, she won't wake up at all. This movie was also directed by Wes Craven, so I really don't have to say anything more. The plot of this one is a monstrous spirit of a slain child murderer seeks revenge by invading the dreams of teenagers whose parents were responsible for his untimely demise. What I think? Right from the start, we see that someone is sharpening knives and attaching them to a glove that is later placed in a menacing fashion to instill an unsettling feeling within you. This, in turn, sets off a chain of events that includes the killing of high schoolers under mysterious circumstances. Now, as soon as you see Tina getting killed by an invisible entity all over the room, to include the ceiling, there's an unimaginable amount of tension. And when you first get a look at Freddy walking down the alley with those super long arms, and then he cuts off his fingers, the fear gets ratcheted up quite a bit more. This movie made going to sleep extremely scary, and it accomplished its mission. I saw this movie when I was a kid. We're talking like well under my teens. I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. Scary as hell, but enjoyed it. This next film can probably take some credit for creating the horror genre in a way. John Carpenter opened up the floodgates with this feature by not just introducing Michael Myers, but by creating a soundtrack that made your hair stand on end. The plot of Halloween goes like this. 15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween night 1963, Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to the small town of Haddonfield, Illinois, to kill again. What I think about this? As we witness the actions of the young Michael killing his sister, there's a feeling of terror that we are complicit in the murder. It puts us in the act, and we are every bit as guilty as Michael. But it also shows us that we are dealing with a monster. Yeah. The way he stalked Laurie Strode throughout the movie and killed everyone without any empathy or remorse showed that he was indeed a vicious and unstoppable being. His inability to be killed when he is shot numerous times adds to the absolute evil inside this man. A true original and innovator at the time ensured that this movie, Halloween, would etch its place in horror movie history. And every year, somebody dresses as Michael Myers. No matter where you are, no matter what country you're in, no matter what city, state, area, village, you name it, you're going to see somebody dressed as Michael Myers. This movie started it. Next in the list, they were warned. They are doomed. And on Friday the 13th, nothing will save them. Friday the 13th. Although Sean S. Cunningham directed the first Friday the 13th, he produced many of the others, to include Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, Freddy vs. Jason, and the 2009 version of Friday the 13th. The plot of this movie: a group of camp counselors are stalked and murdered by an unknown assailant while trying to reopen a summer camp where, years before, was the site of a child's drowning and a grisly double murder. What I think. As I look back at this one, the fact that there were these horny teenagers working to open up this camp, but at the same time get as laid as possible, it was a pretty funny premise. I mean, you had a head counselor who was basically a creep, and then you had the one goofy counselor that dressed like an Indian chief at one point, but was a bit annoying. There were the damsels in distress, and then you had the one decent guy and your final girl. The scariest part of this movie is that you really don't know who the killer is until the end. There are some minor hints, but the big reveal is very surprising. Still, the murders are bloody and the plot is good. The final jump scare is what solidified the horror aspect for me and made me look forward to the sequel that you knew was going to happen. Great movie. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre also takes a spot in our little countdown. Who will survive and what will be left of them? The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. America's most bizarre and brutal crimes. Small tagline on the bottom of that poster is, "What happened is true. Now the motion picture that is just as real." Tobe Hooper directed the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well as Part 2. He's also directed The Mangler, Night Terrors, and The Toolbox Murderers, which came out in 2004. Sadly, he passed away in 2017. He is also missed. The plot of this movie is that two siblings and 3 of their friends are en route to visit their grandfather's grave in Texas, but end up falling victim to a family of cannibalistic psychopaths and must survive the terrors of Leatherface and his family. What I think. From the moment you hear the flashbulbs, you know that what you're about to see is going to be strange. Not only are our unsuspecting victims clueless in the amount of danger that they're in, they also decide to make several horrible decisions. Horrible! That in essence led to their deaths. First off, never pick up hitchhikers. I don't care if it's the most beautiful woman in the world. Don't pick her ass up. She may be a killer. Secondly, never go into another person's house and snoop around. That's the stupidest thing you can do. Lastly, if you hear anything along the lines of creepy, such as a chainsaw going off in the background or banjos, get the hell out of there. You're gonna die. Okay? Leatherface solidified his position in the horror genre as one of the scariest MFers out there. In the category of mongoloid and brutal murderer, his only real rival is Jason Voorhees. This movie's great because it's what you hope to not run into when you're going down a dark alley or driving cross country through small towns. You stop at a gas station and find out that it's a cannibalistic crew of people who will throw you in their chili. You know what I mean? That kind of scary. That's what solidifies this movie in the horror genre. So let's move on to another type of horror movie. Poltergeist. They're here. It knows what scares you. And yes, Tobe Hooper directed this one as well. And it helped to usher in a new level of fear in the paranormal world. Right? Before we were talking about cannibals and regular people just being creepy and psychotic spirits from the hoary underworld. But now we got some crazier stuff. The plot of this movie is a family's home is haunted by a host of demon ghosts. True, it is. It is. This movie is probably the reason that I have the fear of the dark that I do, and ventriloquist dummies. The paranormal world was opened up and introduced people to a new term, poltergeist. In most cases, people had heard of hauntings or ghosts, but didn't really know anything about violent manifestations that can interact in negative ways with humans. Even though this movie caused me to have great fear, it opened me up to something that I didn't know that I needed to know. It paved the way for other paranormal movies and shows that millions of people enjoy daily. And it created a job that nobody knew existed: paranormal investigator. Other movies that branched off from this particular movie would be the entire Paranormal Activity series. That's like 6 movies. You also have 3 more Poltergeist movies, and each one of them is just as cursed as this one. But that's also something for another episode some other time. The next movie we're going to talk about brings up Cryptozoology, an American werewolf in London. John Landis, who is more known for his comedy movies, such as National Lampoon's Animal House and The Blues Brothers, brought forth this horror movie with a comedic edge. The plot is that 2 American college students on a walking tour of Britain are attacked by a werewolf that none of the locals will admit exists. What I think. I never really wanted to go to England when I was young, and this movie kind of cemented that there was no reason for me to go there ever. At all. None. Are you telling me that there are small villages in the United Kingdom where people know that there are things out there and they choose not to believe it? Sorry, I don't need to visit that country. But later on in life, I lived in England for a few years, and I truly enjoyed that country. It was very nice. Everything that American Werewolf in London told me to be scared of, I didn't really need to do it, although it was terrifyingly dark there. But I did appreciate the country. This movie had 3 of the greatest jump scares of all time. Number 1 is when the werewolf attacks Jack. That's like the first 10 minutes of the movie. Number 2, after David wakes up from the mutant Nazi dream and the mutant Nazi kills the nurse. Number 3, while David is dreaming again and he wakes up with that crazy demon face. Whew, jump scare, right there. All in all, Rick Baker, the special effects makeup artist, did a fantastic job on creating a werewolf transformation scene that hurt to watch. Physical pain through your body. And he deserved the Oscar that he won for it. It was fantastic. The last entry on this list of horror is a classic in its own right. Here's the tagline. They keep coming back in a bloodthirsty lust for human flesh. Pits the dead against the living in a struggle for survival. The Night of the Living Dead. As far as directors go, George A. Romero created the zombie genre as we know it today. His vision of a zombie trilogy was realized in the Night, Dawn, and Day of the Dead franchise. And this aided in the paranoia and terror that we have in recent years with the release of The Walking Dead, of which he inspired it. Sadly, he too passed away in 2017 in Toronto, Canada. And he's also greatly missed. The plot of this movie is that a ragtag group of Pennsylvanians barricade themselves in an old-fashioned farmhouse to remain safe from a bloodthirsty, flesh-eating breed of monster who are ravaging the east coast of the United States. What I think. This is the definitive start of a subgenre. The dead rise and eat the living. That right there is what fuels nightmares. Cannibalism. The fear that someone you know and love who has passed on will come back only to feast on you. The terror was passed on to a generation that was convinced that the Russians were going to drop a nuclear weapon on them at any given time. And as a kid, this movie created so much tension because of the dynamic of the people in the farmhouse and how they communicated with each other and listened to or ignored each other. The human portion of this movie was scary, and the zombies were just kind of there to create the external tension. This was a great movie, and it holds up to this day. That's not just my opinion, that's a fact. So with that, that's the end of my little horror list for your Halloween enjoyment. If I mention a movie that you may not have heard of, or you think you might enjoy, check out the description box. I'm going to leave all links of every movie I talked about in this episode in the details. Visit them, buy them, check them out, pass them on to your friends. Horror brings the world together. Don't think of yourself as weird. Think of yourself as a person that thinks outside the box. You can visit me on Facebook at DJ's Movies, spelled DEEJAYS Movies, MOVIES. Also the same for Twitter, if you want to check out my Twitter feeds. And just for S's and G's, what's your top 10 horror movie list? Put it in the comments. I want to check it out. So with that, thank you very much for joining me. Hit the subscribe button, like the video, hit that bell icon to get notifications for any time I release content, and finally, leave a comment. Just as I stated before, let's talk about these movies or any movie that's on your mind. Be sure to leave me a suggestion, and I will check it out if I can. From DJ's Movie Reviews, thank you for joining me. I'll see you again.